Thank you so much and welcome back, everyone. The Kenyan court verdict has altered the political flow in the country, even if President Uhuru Kenyatta wins the rerun election. This leaves questions on the table of hundreds of international observers, including former Secretary of State John Kerry to the United States, who said they saw no interference in the vote. Let's continue with the conversation. Let's take a drive to Abuja studio, where my guest Ezenwa Nwagu is standing by. He is an election expert, ED, Partners for Electoral Reforms. The allegations of Russian interference and the arcing narrative, now the Supreme Court nullifying the election, the presidential election in Kenya. Nigeria will go to the polls in less than 2 years. What are the implications?
Well, thank you, Sheung. What's come out clear from Kenya, the message is clear that everything doesn't have to be perfect for you to do the right thing. When we ask for justice here, we are told that our courts are not computerized. We are told that the judges write in longhand. We are told that they don't have security of tenure. We are told that all this has implications for why it is impossible to have an independent judiciary. But Kenya doesn't seem to have all these, and yet they've raised the notch a bit higher in terms of judicial independence. And it's exciting for Africa that from a country that is known to be politically tempestuous, that we're having its judiciary courageously intervening to ensure that those who will govern Kenya would have legitimacy. And that legitimacy is important because it raises also the confidence of the voters. So as we approach 2019, the deficit that we've always had is the confidence of the Nigerian voter in terms of if we get justice from the courts. Is it possible to put away black market injunctions that stop elections or that stop the EMB from performing its functions? So there's so much that has been thrown on the doorstep of the Nigerian judiciary to take a critical look at itself and begin to shape up. Because the truth of the matter is that we will have thought that being giants of Africa, that will be leading in things that are this progressive, that are this nice, that will excite our citizens. But funny, it's coming from Kenya. And the huge lesson for us here is that everything doesn't need to be perfect. We don't have to have everything that we need to do our work conscientiously and raise the moral bar up in such a manner that the confidence of your citizens in the electoral process, the legitimacy of the people in government can be intact.
Talking about the conduct of the election and the process, technology application comes to the fore, and the manner in which Kenya conducted its election. And we look at the electoral process in that country, there has been the holes that have been picked in it. It brings to the fore the manner in which Nigeria conducts its own election. As an election observer and expert in that area, what are your fears ahead of 2019 elections?
My worry will be the conduct of politicians. I think, like I've often said, we've put a lot of searchlight on the activities of the EMB, and in incremental fashion, they are improving by the day. But not a lot of attention is focused on the politician, is the political parties, their ability to self-reflect and ensure that there is internal party democracy within them, to ensure also that they do not subvert the process that has been put on ground. Technology is incrementally being used in our elections. If you remember, Shehu, in 2015, there was a lot of fights against the smart card reader, but it's come to stay. We'll continue to improve it and make it better. But all in all, it's important that all election stakeholders, including the EMB, observers, the media, begin to ensure that a lot of attention is being paid on the conduct of the political class and the manner in which they engage election from do or die to ensure that that doesn't happen. now the mirror is facing the judiciary. I'm sure that they will take a cue. They would shape up brilliantly. But the Nigerian politician seems not to have learned any lesson, and not a lot of advocacy is pushed to ensure that they understand that legitimacy is important and that the confidence of the citizens in those who rule them and govern them is very important.
Strong lessons from Kenya. But let me come back to Lagos now. If you look at the comparison of election costs across Africa, across the world, in Nigeria, the cost of the per capita cost of election in Nigeria seems to fall about $9. In Kenya, it's about $25. They seem to have a higher cost of conducting elections, and also the money being spent in the election by politicians and other agencies. As it stands right now, it's a big lesson, isn't it? Looking at the issues that came up after 2015 elections, what lesson do you see in terms of cost?
Yeah, you know, funny enough, in terms of cost, there is a bar even in the Electoral Act. You know, that for presidential election, you can't spend beyond a certain amount. For the governorship election, you can't spend, your campaigns shouldn't go beyond them. I can't remember the specific amount, but there is a bar. But how much have INEC been able to monitor the accounts of these political parties? And so that's where I want to, you know, digress a little bit. Politicians all over the world will be desperate to win elections, most especially in Africa, where the only viable, you know, and lucrative jobs is politics and governance and political office, where corruption is, corruption holds sway. But what, you know, countries are doing is their electoral bodies are raising the bar to ensure that even if the political parties try to manipulate the processes, the electoral body and the courts will step up to ensure that the processes that are manipulated are nullified. Right. That's what the court in Kenya had done. That's the lesson we should take.
With some speed as we round up the conversation now, as it stands right now, I've never seen, or I've not seen the Supreme Court in Nigeria, that is the highest court in the land, upturning any election, cancelling an election and calling for a rerun. There are no staggered elections. In this case in Kenya, it's saying an outright rerun of the elections. It looks like the Supreme Court in Nigeria is shy of nullifying elections.
You know, there's this belief, perception that, oh, Supreme Court generally are conservative. But that's why in Nigeria, I remember in 1979, Supreme Court had to find a way out of the 12-2 quagmire. And then also in the 2003 election, presidential election. But in Kenya, what they have done is to come down heavily and also to set a precedent that you don't have to be conservative. In as far as, you know, democracy is concerned, you have to take a radical approach. If the processes are irregular, they're irregular. And so if the figures do not tally, then there is no need to patch them.
All right. Liberals Oshoma, lawyer, a regular political analyst on Channel Television. Thank you so much for your time on the program. My pleasure, always. And also, my very interesting guest in Abuja, the election expert, Mr. Ezenwa Nwago. We'll still drag you some time to talk more on this issue. Many thanks for your thoughts on the program. Just before we go, if there is anything good and bad precedents have in common, it is a justifiable measure that can help shape the future also in either way. That's our show for tonight. Many thanks for being part of it, everyone. I'm Sean Wakimaloe. Bye for now.